Deep within the forest heart, a stone throne stands. From it emerges a dark and sinister entity, a pure evil manifestation that casts a malevolent presence upon the surroundings. Our story begins with the final thoughts of our protagonist, Irakudo, who is facing death's grip. His life, marked by a constant battle with illness, ends frustratingly at the age of 18. Surprisingly, he accepts his fate with unexpected calmness. As his consciousness plunges into darkness, the sensation of something brushing against his fingers marks his final moments. In death's agony, a transition occurs. The touch evolves, and Ira finds himself wondering if it was the softness of grass or the hardness of a rock. Gradual brightness envelopes him, prompting him to open his eyes to the soothing sound of rustling leaves. To his bewilderment, he now sits on a stone structure in an unfamiliar place. He wonders if this could be the realm where souls find themselves after departing from life. The place's coldness sends shivers through him as he surveys his surroundings, taking in the crisp freshness of the air. Suddenly, a mysterious girl emerges from the woods. His eyes widen in shock as he notices something oddly familiar about her attire. Struggling to comprehend the resemblance of her dress to something he knows, he tentatively addresses her as a two. She regards him with respect, addressing him as her king. Takuto's eyes grow wide as he recognizes the black dress Atu is wearing. He can't believe it's from the video game Eternal Nations. This game lets players run a country and work with different groups in a fantasy world, trying to be the best through careful planning and turns. Atu, standing before him, was one of the hero units in that game. For Takuto, the game served as an escape during his days tethered to medication, especially after his parents stopped visiting. Immersed in the intricate gameplay, he managed to forget the profound loneliness that gripped him. In the end, he achieved the remarkable feat of becoming the top player in the rankings, earning the title of a legendary player. His success was attributed to the Unit Atu, and it was all accomplished before his untimely death. However, now, in what he considers the afterlife, Atu stands before him, leaving him bewildered by her unexpected presence. Dumbfounded, he contemplates why she would be in this place, questioning her existence's nature here. To his confusion, she chuckles and encourages him to calm down. She commends his exceptional talent, particularly noting his achievement of the first-ever Nightmare difficulty clear while playing as the hardest nation, the civilization of Ruin Minogra. She acknowledges him as a legendary player, prompting Takuto to inquire how she is aware of his gaming accomplishments. She replies with a bright smile that she remembers everything Takuto-sama told her, the times they conquered the world together and the times they lost as well. She assures him not to worry, he recalls all about her, understanding his policies and play style. Takuto admits that due to his weak body, he always aspired to become like her. Grateful for the conversation, he questions if this place is heaven and if she called him here. She responds negatively, stating that it doesn't feel like heaven to her. Even upon arrival, this new world resembles the world of Eternal Nations a lot. Takuto is surprised to hear about an unknown world. She acknowledges that it might sound cliché but respectfully suggests to Takuto-sama to start a new life in that place with her. Although shocked by her offer, he remains silent. She expresses her readiness to begin anew with him, constructing their kingdom in this unfamiliar world. Takuto contemplates the offer, considering the possibilities with his now freely movable body. Desiring to test his newfound mobility, he proposes to her that they build their country, a kingdom just for the two of them. She readily accepts the proposal. Her full name is revealed to be Atu the Sludge, the bastard child of the world-ruining mud. The system message appears, announcing that the new game has started with Takuto as the player, Civilization Minogra, and the alignment set to evil. However, the difficulty level of the game is still uncertain. Both Takuto and Atu feel a sense of embarrassment as they formally begin this new adventure, but they agree that it's for the best. Takuto asks Atu if she remembers the objectives for their evil nation of Minogra in order to lead the world to destruction. To initiate the world's demise, the first step is clear. Those who have a vivid recollection of the game recognize that only one person successfully cleared it with this particular country, employing a secret playstyle. The requirement is to adopt a shut-in lifestyle. Despite Minogra officially being the most evil nation, its civilization trait specializes in internal administration, giving it a combat handicap. It stands as a super-specialized country primarily focused on domestic affairs. A massive dark shadow suddenly materializes in the distant forest of the Dark Continent in the Great Cursed Lands. This looming presence serves as an omen of impending disaster, but the question arises about its sudden manifestation. A mysterious figure appears before the shadow, addressing it as Your Holiness, and announcing that the time has finally arrived. In response, the shadow refers to the figure as a cardinal and expresses a desire to discuss an important matter. Meanwhile, Takuto and Datu are shockingly looking at something as they produce a long-legged bug from the scout unit using the mana they had. Both find the creature repulsive. Despite their familiarity with its 3D model from the game, witnessing it in reality proves to be a bit overwhelming. Takuto, unsure of what to do next, tells the bug to look around their area for them. He asks it to avoid running into any other creatures if possible, all in the name of glorious Manogra. He assigns the bug the task of survival, essentially sending it out to explore. The bug complies and departs obediently. Atu initially feels a bit uneasy, but she soon understands that the creature's main job is to obey commands from unit leaders. Takuto can even share their vision to some extent. Things are proceeding smoothly. Atu inquires about Takuto's remaining mana. He informs her that he started with 200, and after summoning the bug, he now has 100 mana left. Although he has the ability to create anything if he has enough mana, the cost of emergency production is steep. Therefore, it's not wise to use it carelessly at this stage. However, gaining knowledge about their surroundings is crucial. Both of them have some mana left, but squandering it unnecessarily is not a viable option. Atu wants to express her commitment to doing her best as a militia, but as a unit hero, her strength increases with time. Currently, her combat power is only 3, so encountering an enemy of level 5 might lead to her being overwhelmed. Her gradual power growth is one of the reasons why Manogra is challenging to play. The planet's difficulty level is inherently high, but that's how it has always been. The bug continues to scout the entire area, providing Takuto with a comprehensive view of the terrain. However, it's apparent that the landscape is dominated by vast forests. Takuto assumes the forest to be extensive. Atu informs him that they haven't come across any food icons yet, nor have they encountered any enemies, such as animals or monsters. Forest terrains usually have a concealment effect, making them ideal for Takuto and Atu. However, the absence of wildlife seems unusual to them. Despite this, they decide to continue scouting for a little longer. Atu feels sorry and sad for not being very useful, but for Takuto, her company alone is sufficient. Hearing this from her king makes her extremely happy. Takuto, lost in thought, wonders if her cute demeanor was part of her personality from the beginning or if it developed over time. Noticing him immersed in thought, she asks if he is listening to her. Suddenly, he receives communication from the bug and shares his vision with Atu. They discover a dark elf settlement, confirming that they are indeed in a fantasy world. The dark elves were generally neutral but leaned a little closer to evil. This fact brought some relief to them. However, Atu points out that they could also be lawful dark elves, and if they were from another country, their situation might be grim. Being close to another nation this early on could lead to unfavorable consequences. They decide to gather more information about these dark elves before making any decisions. However, fate takes an unexpected turn. As they survey their surroundings, their eyes widen with shock and confusion. To their dismay, some dark elves have discovered them. The scene transitions to the arduous journey of elves through the vast and untamed forest. They find themselves grappling with the harsh realities of survival. The majority of the group is on the brink of death, including the children whom they had prioritized in their allocation of resources. Captain Gia contemplates the dire situation, firmly believing that they can't sustain their travel in this manner. As he reflects on their predicament, a voice calls out to him from behind. It is Molter, an elder among them. Gia, acknowledging his presence, asserts that despite any advice, their problems persist. Molter, with a heavy heart, expresses his understanding. However, he implores Gia to listen before they proceed, understanding the gravity of their situation. He warns Gia that the cursed forest stretches along the periphery of these unexplored lands. While the forest seems lush and full of life, he warns him that there's a dangerous force hidden deep within it. This evil presence fills him with fear. Gia, taken aback, queries about the nature of this evil entity. However, he stays quiet, not sharing details but stressing the need to be careful in the woods. Despite the ominous warning, the desperate situation of his starving people forces Gia to make a tough choice. Refusing to compromise on his people's survival, he recognizes the seriousness of their situation. To avoid imminent death, he decides to search every part of the forest for food. Despite his warning about the strange nature of the forest, Gia dismisses his concerns, considering them mere superstition. Driven by the urgent need for food, the group presses on, now standing before Takuto and Atu. Gia's attention is drawn to Takuto, whom he perceives as a completely dark spirit shadow, an embodiment of evil taking on a human form. He contemplates whether this might be a manifestation of malevolence as he's unable to see beyond the shadow. Aware that his decisions may shape the destiny of his entire race, Jia understands the gravity of the situation. With the weight of responsibility upon him, he recognizes the importance of carefully choosing his words and actions. In a show of respect, he bows before Takuto and introduces himself as a dark elf of the Mazarama clan and the captain of the Dark Elves, Jia Najif. Respectfully, he addresses Takuto as a noble being and offers his sincere apologies for entering his forest without permission. Atu interjects, questioning Jia's understanding of the gravity of trespassing into a foreign land, and labels it a sin. She presses him for any specific excuse or reason justifying this transgression. Jia, recognizing the need for careful explanation, shares the story of his Dark Elf clan, Mazaramu. He describes how they once inhabited a land at the center of the Idaragia continent. Considering the possible threat posed by Atu, who seems to have a close connection with the dark spirit shadow, Jia speaks slowly and carefully and tries to soothe her. However, his approach has the opposite effect, as Atu impatiently demands a brief explanation. Fearing the consequences, Jia and the others become visibly anxious. He quickly explains that they were persecuted and driven from their homeland, with no place else to turn, and it led them to seek refuge in the forest. Regret washes over Jia as he realizes that his detailed explanation may not have effectively conveyed their situation. Takuto, appearing disinterested, gives no indication of wanting to hear the full story. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Takuto speaks, questioning how they all became so weak. This unexpected development leaves them all taken aback, as they hadn't anticipated his ability to communicate. In response, Jia explains that their persecution was severe, forcing them to flee to this unfamiliar land. Seeking refuge, they sheltered in a place but eventually ran out of supplies during their journey. Desperate and starving, they ventured into the forest in search of food, only to come up empty-handed. Frustration seizes Jia once more, realizing that he may have given too much detail, deviating from a direct answer to their questions. Continuing, he reveals the extent of their plight. They had gone several days without any sustenance. The desperation to survive had led them to bow their heads and seek mercy, yet Jia couldn't shake the ominous feeling that, even after begging, they might face punishment from the dark spirit. All he wished for was the happiness and peace of his clan. He questions himself whether the desire to survive was truly a sinful act. The situation had grown increasingly complex with each passing moment. Unexpectedly, Takuto drops an apple in front of Jia. With a surprising twist, Takuto informs them that it pairs well with rabbit. The elves, unfamiliar with such a fruit, marvel at the sight of the apple. It's an entirely unknown delicacy, emanating a sweet aroma and possessing a weighty moisture that captivates their senses. He generously provides more apples, and the elves, tasting the fruit, are enchanted by its sweet flavor and freshness. Jia, however, admonishes them for consuming the apples carelessly. To their surprise, Takuto extends his generosity further, offering them pears. The elves, especially Jia, are astonished by the sight of this unfamiliar fruit. Atu encourages Jia to accept the gift from the king, emphasizing its significance. While the other elves eagerly partake in the feast, Jia, still able to move despite his hunger, selflessly implores Takuto to give the fruits to their starving children. The women and children of their clan, weakened by hunger, are in desperate need. Jia pleads for this benevolent offering to be bestowed upon the hungry children of his clan. In silence, Takuto and Atu gaze upon the elves with a somber expression. In a secluded part of the forest, a dark elf mother sits beneath a tree, cradling her child in her lap. With a tearful gaze, she sings a lullaby, coaxing her little one to sleep, reassuring him not to be afraid. Just as the child begins to drift off, Jia arrives, urging them not to sleep yet. He presents them with freshly mashed fruits, brought by the other men who have also arrived. With gratitude in her eyes, the mother feeds the mashed fruits to her child, and the little one finally opens his eyes. The group expresses their heartfelt thanks to Jia for saving their lives. They collectively prepare the food and eagerly partake, their faces radiating happiness despite their impoverished state. As they savor the nourishing meal, the night spreads its wings overhead. Jia's assistant informs him about the last sack of fruits, and a wave of relief washes over him as he beholds the abundance of provisions before him. She expresses gratitude for the life-saving bounty. However, Molter, upon hearing the full story, cautions Jia that Takuto might not have acted out of pure benevolence, emphasizing that he likely expects something in return. Molter advises Jia not to use respectful words like his benevolence for Takuto. Jia, feeling a surge of anger, defends his choice, highlighting that Takuto was their only hope to save his people from hunger. Despite the potential ulterior motives, Takuto's aid had provided sustenance which allowed their people to sleep peacefully. Jia urges them to focus on the fact that their desperate situation had been alleviated, even if he was perceived as an enigmatic and potentially malevolent being. Sorrowfully, Jia bows his head, seeking an answer from Molter about what else he could have done in that challenging situation. Meanwhile, Atu expresses anger at Takuto for utilizing all their mana to create the fruits. Takuto, in response, explains that their story had moved him, and he felt compelled to help, fearing it might not be sufficient for their survival. While back in the forest, Atu remains speechless. She eventually diverts Takuto's attention towards mana he used. The Dark Elves return, buoying before him, and despite Atu's attempts to stop him, he produces more fruits. Employing an emergency production policy command, he generates enough sustenance to feed everyone for an extended period. Atu tries to stop him, but in vain, while the Dark Elves, in awe, deem him a great being and express their gratitude for his kindness. As Takuto tries to explain things to Atu, he notices that she seems really offended. It dawns on him that he should have been more careful with how he used his mana. He asks her for help with something crucial, a task he cannot manage without her assistance. Realizing her mistake as a vassal, Atu sincerely apologizes to her king for any unintended offense. She joyfully informs him that producing enough food shouldn't be a problem. Curious about the specific assistance Takuto needs, she asks him directly. In response, he shares his difficulty in communicating effectively with the Dark Elves during their last encounter. Atu, understanding the situation, mentions that he played the role of a strong king who values brevity and dislikes excessive talk. According to her, Takuto's behavior was spot on during their interaction with the Dark Elves, and even if his communication wasn't perfect, she sees no issue with it. As Takuto grapples with the feeling of having a communication disorder, memories of past struggles flood his mind. Overwhelmed, he starts recalling all the times he faced difficulties due to his communication challenges. Witnessing his distress, she kindly reassures him, urging him not to cry. She empathetically tells him that it's okay to make mistakes and suggests seeking guidance from his trusted allies. Expressing concern, she attempts to comfort him, assuring him that in the game, he can overcome any obstacle with the right combination of wealth and military power. However, their conversation takes an unexpected turn as a bug suddenly appears and begins screaming. Despite Atu's scolding, it turns out that Takuto had unintentionally invited the bug back to their base. In the midst of this chaos, Takuto experiences a vision and realizes that the Dark Elves are returning to him. The unfolding events add another layer of excitement and intrigue to the situation. Facing the arrival of the Dark Elves, Takuto assumes they might be here to claim the remaining food. Uncertain about how to handle the situation, he contemplates asking them to leave, feeling the weight of his difficulty in effective communication. His uncertainty lingers as he struggles with both expressing himself clearly and negotiating with the Dark Elves. However, Atu steps in with a solid plan, fully taking responsibility for it. Yet, the unexpected happens. Molter, the elder Dark Elf, expresses his respect towards Takuto. He conveys their gratitude for the help they received and compliments the deliciousness of the food. He identifies himself as the leader of the Dark Elf clan. Sensing that Molter has something more to share, Atu encourages him to speak candidly in front of Takuto, emphasizing an open and honest dialogue between them. While Atu found pleasure in portraying a strong and cruel role, Takuto remained uncertain about her intentions. Meanwhile, Molter took a moment to apologize for the rude behavior of his fellow Dark Elves. Expressing gratitude, he acknowledged Takuto's generosity in providing much-needed supplies. Molter attributed their unsightly behavior to the overwhelming presence of such a great being before them. He assured Takuto that small issues wouldn't be a problem in the presence of a mighty king like him. Expressing the collective regret of his entire race for their minor misbehavior, he humbly asked for Takuto's name, recognizing him as a significant figure worthy of respect. Takuto realized he hadn't told anyone his name during their last meeting. Atu took the chance to announce with a loud voice that she is the ruler of ruins, the queen of the apocalypse in the Takuto era. She stressed how crucial it was to remember his name and insisted that the Dark Elves always talk to him with honor. Molter then stepped forward to thank Takuto, recognizing how much he helped their tribe. Atu introduced herself too, but made it clear that no one should call her by Takuto's title. Malter promised that his people would never forget Takuto's name, seeing him as the hero who rescued them. Even though things went well, Takuto could tell Atu was still set on sticking to her role. She instructs the Dark Elves to take the food before it spoils and leave. Atu's attempt to conclude the meeting is interrupted by Malter. He requests guidance on how they can repay Takuto's kindness. In response, Atu challenges him to promise something that would genuinely satisfy the king. Malter admits they lack ideas on what they can offer. Despite their uncertainty, Atu refuses to accept anything if they cannot come up with a meaningful gesture. Takuto, observing the exchange, wonders if Atu has grown bored with the situation. He hopes to peacefully conclude the meeting. However, Malter persists in wanting to give something in gratitude. Atu, repeatedly declining, questions his intentions and if he is plotting something. In his mind, Takuto repeatedly calls it his name, silently urging her to cease her actions. Despite wearing a smile, he's well aware that the situation is taking a turn for the worse, and he's eager to halt Atu's actions immediately. Giving her a meaningful look, Atu discreetly remarks that the Dark Elves aren't skilled negotiators. Takuto, with a smile on his face, refrains from pointing out Atu's own communication shortcomings. However, he senses her growing concern that allowing the Dark Elves to leave might pose a threat to them in the future, even considering the extreme option of eliminating them. Trying to bring a more positive perspective to the situation, Takuto explains to Atu that perhaps the Dark Elves are seeking a mutually beneficial agreement. As it stands, surviving this encounter won't solve the issue. They still lack a secure place to stay, and it is not possible for them to continue such a miserable life. Being evil-aligned, Takuto feared that the Dark Elves might already be suspicious of them. To avoid making things worse, Takuto decides to help Malter, the Dark Elf, but with a condition: he would ask for something in return. Excited to hear his proposal, Takuto looks forward to the conversation. Atu points that they consider Takuto as some evil dark spirit, startling Malter, who denies it. Atu instructs him to be silent and informs him that the king has decided to receive tributes in exchange for offerings. She asks if they are now relieved. Atu requests something of equal value in return and, not sure what that could be, Takuto suggests asking the Dark Elves for information about the outside world. Malter agrees to the deal and proceeds to share everything he knows about the world. Atu sees this as a beneficial exchange. Takuto has two main reasons for not wanting the Dark Elves to stay in the forest. Firstly, their race belongs to another group, and if the new world operates similarly to the Eternal Nation game world, people from different civilizations and mindsets might lead to conflicts, as in the real world. He contemplates the idea of building a nation using the forest as a foundation. The Dark Elf leader expresses profound gratitude, hoping for permission to establish their residence within the forest. However, Atu vehemently opposes this notion, insisting that they must depart after consuming all the available resources. Observing the exhaustion etched across the faces of the Dark Elves, Takuto grapples with a moral dilemma. He fears that abandoning them in their current state might jeopardize their journey, leaving him with a sense of guilt after providing them with food. Despite Atu's objections, Malter expresses gratitude for the kindness shown thus far and respectfully seeks Takuto's permission to depart. But then, he interrupts Malter, realizing that he is accustomed to being hailed as a legendary player and now wields the authority of a great king. With newfound confidence, he decides to extend an offer. The elves, taken aback by this unexpected turn, regard him with astonishment. Takuto inquires whether they would be interested in becoming citizens of his budding kingdom. The elves, still in a state of disbelief, look at him with wide eyes. Atu, equally surprised, raises her voice, declaring that she needs to discuss matters with the king before any decisions are made. Turning to him, she demands an explanation for his sudden proposal. The Dark Elves are neutrally aligned, precisely why Takuto envisions utilizing the refugee system to recruit them. This way, their alignment undergoes a transformation. However, Atu expresses concern, fearing potential conflicts with the main race of Manogra once they start reproducing. In response, Takuto reminds her of the bug and suggests that the creatures they produce might resemble it. Therefore, maintaining the presence of an intelligent species in the forest is crucial. Besides, both of them find the bug's appearance disagreeable. She is delighted that Takuto is showing interest in something. She stands up and addresses the Dark Elves, informing them that the king intends to establish a nation and is offering them the opportunity to become his citizens. In return, they would receive protection from external threats. Malter inquires about the implications of becoming citizens. Atu grins and confesses that she can't guarantee maternal happiness, but what awaits them is a transformation into the realm of evil once they join as citizens. It is kind of fun for her. 2 days later, Takuto ended to set out to check on the Dark Elves clan. She expresses concern about whether the Dark Elves will genuinely serve them as honest citizens. Takuto reassures her that they can only find out by giving it a try. The homunculus they were producing had a faster reproduction rate but lacked intelligence, causing their intellectual advancements to lag behind other nations. It was crucial for them to overcome this significant disadvantage, and it also provided an opportunity for them to engage in civilized conversations with a different race. Then, they finally seize the Dark Elves' camp. Atu insists on going first, and as she enters their camp, all the elves bow before Takuto. The elders instruct the others not to look directly at Takuto, warning them of consequences similar to the one who seized him. A throne is prepared for him, and Takuto asks all the Dark Elves to gather as he welcomes them as immigrants to their new country, Manogra. Takuto then addresses them, expressing his excitement about building a great nation. The system notifies him that with new citizens, he has successfully created a new nation under his rule. Atu congratulates them all for being part of the citizens of Manogra, promising them peace and prosperity. The elves are eagerly waiting for the ceremony to end. But then, they all feel something inside them at once. Hatred is rising from deep inside their bodies for the ones who persecuted them and laughed at them as if they were worthless. Hate now fills their minds. Takuto asks them if they are all right. They all finally understand what it is like to be protected. They all start cheering for Takuto for his long rule. A few days later, Atu and Takuto are sitting with some papers in their hands. Atu asks him if he has read it. Takuto confirms that he has read it all. Elves provided a mattress to Takuto, where he lies leisurely. Atu informs him that the two biggest countries on that continent are hardcore good-aligned, with one being a human nation that worships a benevolent deity, and the other an elven nation that reveres nature. She warns Takuto that if they encounter them, it could be fatal. He becomes really worried. While it's fortunate that they gathered information about the area from Molter, they weren't anticipating that the nations with the maximum hostility towards Manogra would be such dominant powers. The forest, as their starting location, wasn't ideal, and to make matters worse, the forest productivity was zero. This meant that obtaining any food, minerals, or mana from there was impossible. Atu contemplates the challenges they face in the game. Even without development, it was usually possible to obtain food and minerals depending on the environment, which serves as the foundation for developing an advanced kingdom. However, this wasn't the case for them, putting them in a critical situation. Molter approaches him and inquires whether he should continue explaining about the outer world. He glances at Takuto, who appears extremely grim. Walter asks if anything is bothering him. Just then, Gia arrives and reports that he has brought one of his subordinates, Imuru, who is also in charge of their intelligence. Imuru is highly knowledgeable about information and traditions from other countries. Gia believes that she can be of great assistance to the king. Atu expresses satisfaction with their dedication, hoping for positive results today. He then instructs Molter not to be too formal, as Takuto also doesn't appreciate such strict formalities. Molter stands up, expressing his intention to refrain from strict formalities. Takuto, feeling uneasy about the sudden respect, contemplates his newfound position as an ordinary person. Molter resumes from where he left off the last time, but Atu interrupts him, indicating that they first need to discuss their future plans. Atu informs them that they have all become vital members of their national administration, and she plans to assign each of them significant roles. Elder Molter is given the duty of managing the country due to his knowledge of magic, while Gia is reinstated as the captain, a role he held before. She instructs him to continue leading the warriors, and both of them agree to the king's command. Gia becomes very excited, expressing his readiness to order his men to do whatever it takes, even to the extent of harming infants, all for the sake of the king. Meanwhile, Molter sees this as the beginning of their campaign, envisioning countless enemies falling before them as the king's vanguard. He believes that by eliminating those who persecuted them, they will earn the approval of the King of Ruins. Takuto, feeling a sense of unease, finds Gia's enthusiasm extreme. He intervenes, telling Gia that there is no need for such extreme measures, as they will establish the rule of ruin without resorting to such brutality. Gia questions Takuto about his plans for ruling the world. He responds by expressing his preference for peace over barbaric wars. Gia, not entirely pleased with their king being a pacifist, looks at Molter, who is smiling blissfully. Atu intervenes, advising them to get plenty of rest, as she plans to build proper houses afterward. Molter expresses gratitude for her kindness, highlighting that unlike Jia, who boasts about his strength, he can contribute in various areas. There's clearly a sense of rivalry between Molter and Jia. Atu whispers to Takuto that she feels like both of them are hardcore workaholics. Atu inquires whether she should now give them the command to collect materials for making homes or select the area for it. Takuto contemplates giving them rest, but realizes that it wouldn't be the most efficient use of their dedication and motivation. He ponders on what tasks the Dark Elves would excel at and asks Edu to instruct them to undertake terrain improvements without harming the forests. Molter mentions that they may not be as skilled as the elves belonging to the light, but they prefer utilizing the big trees rather than bare ground. Atu responds that it sounds like a good start. Jia, once again shocked, learns that the king does not want to destroy the forest, expressing genuine anticipation. He instructs them not to forget to reforest and work diligently. Jia, curious, asks him about what he means by reforesting. Atu is shocked to hear that they have no idea about reforesting, and even Elder Molter seems unfamiliar with the concept. She reminds them that in their previous meeting, they discussed iron equipment and fortress construction, then asks if they have ever heard about military magic or the 6 elements. Molter elaborates, explaining that they have a basic understanding of the 4 elemental forces, which serves as the foundation for their magical practices. In their usual approach, magicians support warriors, but the concept of military magic is new to them. Takuto had initially expected their technological advancements to include skills like smelting, fishing, and fortress construction. Upon closer inspection, Molter realizes that the Dark Elves' magical abilities are not as advanced as Takuto anticipated. Atu expresses surprise, mentioning that they had assumed the Dark Elves possess some form of terrain improvement technology, but their actual level appears to be much lower than expected. However, they were unaware of the reason behind this. Now that they know the world's level of magical technology is very low, they realize that if they expedite their development, they can gain a significant advantage over others. Atu then explains to them that reforesting involves planting trees in an area previously deforested to preserve the vegetation. Molter responds that if it's truly all about planting trees, then they don't need any magical technology. The real issue, however, is that some trees might take even centuries to grow properly. Atu informs them that the reforesting technique she was discussing involves a magical element to accelerate plant growth, and she attributes this knowledge to Takuto. Takuto is surprised to hear this and feels a bit weird about the praise. Atu continues to commend Takuto, expressing that they have the honor of being his citizens. She emphasizes how great the king is, claiming he is 100 times greater than they realize, and that he can fulfill any request they have. Takuto is left in great despair by Atu's boastful talk. Imura shares with Atu that a while back, the Holy Kingdom of Qualia was hit by a devastating plague. This resulted in a large number of deaths. The priests from Qualia believed it to be a curse from a demon. However, Atu has a different theory. She suggests that the real cause might have been overhunting of cats living in the city, which led to an explosion in the rat population. She explains that when someone dies from the plague, rats can eat the body and become carriers of the disease themselves. Without any predators like cats to control their numbers, the rat population grows, increasing their contact with humans. Imuru expresses shock upon learning that the rats were the carriers of the disease causing people to die. Atu corrects her, emphasizing that it's not the rats themselves but the germs inside them that lead to fatalities. She elaborates on the existence of small microscopic creatures in the world, unseen by the naked eye. Atu further explains that various methods can be used to combat the disease. However, bloodletting, a common historical practice, is not always effective and can weaken the body instead. While prayer is acknowledged as effective, it poses challenges when dealing with a large population, making it impractical. Atu mentions that the king has made a decision, although Takuto himself hasn't said anything. Inside, he thinks how Atu is effectively ruining his name. She adds that in the land where the king used to live, there was vast knowledge that they are not aware of. She reveals that the apple given by the king was created in the land of gods. Imura recalls the grape she ate and mentions finding seeds in it. She planted them, and they were already budding. She expresses excitement about seeing them grow. However, Jia and Molter scold her for taking such action without the king's permission. Atu reconfirms, asking if Imura replanted a fruit from the land of the gods. Meanwhile, Takuto is inwardly regretting that he didn't think of such an idea earlier. The emergency production had generated items from other worlds within the game, but strategic resources were not part of that equation. Now, he contemplates whether this concept extends to strategic resources within the game. He decides on a plan. First, focus on acquiring industry technology and building up the population to enable mass production. Additionally, if he can gather enough mana, he believes he could create resources that could reshape warfare dynamics in the otherworld. Takuto reflects on the creation of oil and how it became a catalyst for extensive mass killings worldwide. He understands that in a world unfamiliar with concepts like reforestation, it is akin to having a cheat code. Emiru nervously questions if she shouldn't have taken such action without asking. With a grin on their faces, Takuto and Atuwitha respond that she actually did a perfect job. To them, it feels like a significant victory, realizing the potential impact and advantages that could arise from such actions in their world. Meanwhile, the continent of Idaragia boasts a distinctive configuration resembling two interconnected circles. The southern region is famously known as the Dark Continent, and the northern part is known as the Lawful Continent. Currently, the Holy Kingdom of Qualia governs the northern continent, mostly populated by humans, and the Elementals Alliance of Alner, led by elves. Notably, these two influential nations are actively fostering stable diplomatic ties. A significant catalyst in this diplomatic endeavor is the deployment of the formidable ultimate weapon known as a saint. People in the freezing polar belt of the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, in the far north, express their troubles to the respected saint. Seeking her divine intervention, they plead for assistance in their troubles. Within the expanse of the continent of Idaragia resides one of the esteemed seven saints, namely Saint Selena of Splendid Burials. Responding to the pleas of the suffering people, Saint Selena firmly states that the committed transgressions won't be forgiven, and the time for repentance has passed. She turns to the cries of the innocent and the call of her peace-seeking deity. She considers the sins of disrupting order and defying the holy God to deserve severe punishment. Following her divine judgment, she imposes a harsh sentence, sealing the fate of the wrongdoers in the splendid burial. In a solemn gesture, she unleashes fiery punishment, symbolizing divine justice for their corrupt actions in the Holy Kingdom. Turning her attention to the cardinal, Saint Selena inquires about their previous day's discussion. Looking a bit flustered, the cardinal explains the details of the investigation into the ominous prophecy of disaster from the accursed lands. Faced with the potential threat, the determined saint suggests personally taking on the mission if sending troops turns out to be a challenge. This surprises the cardinal, who quickly explains the bureaucratic complexities of mobilizing the Order of Holy Knights. He highlights the need for a formal petition to the central government and the careful arrangements for provisions and rewards. Stressing the importance of following these steps, the cardinal clarifies that mobilizing the Holy Knights is not something to be done hastily. Expressing his concern, he questions the saint's grasp of her role, implying that her thoughts seem to disregard the responsibilities associated with being a saint. He queries her expectations, emphasizing that as a saint, she is no longer a common woman. Upon hearing these words, the saint looks at the cardinal with a touch of sadness. Before deciding to walk away, he asserts that he will personally engage with someone capable of mobilizing troops. As he departs, the cardinal, in a low murmur, refers to her as a peasant girl. The determined saint vows to do whatever it takes to save her people. Meanwhile, in the Minogra territory within the Great Cursed Land, the time has come for the construction of forts and the establishment of a proper nation. The attention turns to this distant area, where they're actively working on laying the groundwork for a strong foundation and a secure stronghold. The initiative is to continue with detailed plans for fortification and expansion. Gia announces that the success of this effort depends on the collective assistance of everyone involved. After a few weeks since the Dark Elves were granted citizenship, the progress appears promising, and everything seems to be moving smoothly toward success. Among those involved, Takuto feels a sense of relief, particularly grateful for the fact that he no longer has to wear hospital gowns. Now dressed in more fashionable clothes, he comfortably sits on his stone pedestal, indicating a significant improvement from his earlier days. In governing the newly established nation, they've implemented a systematic approach for monthly mana collection from citizens. The collected mana is directly tied to the happiness of the citizens, creating a proportional relationship. The happier the citizens, the more mana is gathered. This implies that the development of Takuto's nation is closely connected to the well-being and contentment of its people. Unfazed by the responsibility, he is determined to lead his people personally to the peak of happiness. Atu, pleased to witness Takuto's satisfaction, delves into the initial planning discussions. Their primary focus is on constructing facilities and food production. Understanding the basic fact that hunger makes citizens vulnerable, she highlights the need to secure reliable food sources. Moulter, while acknowledging the critical importance of food production, raises a curious point. He wonders if the king himself possesses the ability to generate an infinite supply of food. In response, Atu explains that indeed, the king has the capacity for such feats. However, she introduces the potential challenge of distribution issues as the territory expands. To address this concern, she advocates for providing citizens with facilities enabling them to harvest their own food. Takuto finds himself contemplating the feasibility of accomplishing seemingly impossible feats. Moulter, on the other hand, aligns with Atu's vision and agrees to every aspect she initiates. In the course of their planning, Atu entrusts Moulter with a small tree and instructs him to nurture it to thrive. As they move forward, Atu introduces the need to establish various facilities, including a management post, a collection hub, and a storage post. Moulter, unfamiliar, seeks clarification from Atu. In response, she presents the small tree she gave him and explains that it's a flesh tree. The elder, intrigued yet puzzled, asks Atu to elaborate further. She reveals that the flesh tree serves as a vital food production facility for their civilization. Specifically, it is a tree that bears a mysterious fruit with a taste remarkably similar to human meat. He comprehends the concept of the flesh tree, but concerns linger within him. Despite the change in their alignment with evil, he anticipates opposition from those who may resist the idea of consuming human-like meat. Addressing his worry, she reassures him that the implementation of the flesh tree is primarily an experiment focused on tree growth. He seems a bit eased by the explanation. He finds solace in the notion that it's more about cultivating trees than the unsettling prospect of consuming human-like fruits. Takuto, reflecting on the situation, recognizes the diversity of people's likes and dislikes. Amidst their considerations, the system notification interrupts, announcing the selection of the facility to be constructed and the beginning of its construction. The discussion moves on to the second topic, research plans. Atu emphasizes the pivotal role that technology, developed through research, can play in significantly enhancing a country's power. In the case of their small nation, access to more advanced technologies becomes crucial. Acknowledging the limited manpower at their disposal, Moulter seeks guidance from Atu on where to commence their technological endeavors, expressing particular excitement about the prospect of using their knowledge of magic. Responding to Moulter's inquiry, she deliberates on the type of magic they should focus on. While they possess only a modest amount of magical prowess, it still presents an exciting avenue for exploration. Atu suggests considering military magic, pointing out that, even with a formidable army, regular magic can target only a few dozen individuals at most. In contrast, military magic has the potential to impact large expanses of land, serving as a potent deterrent even against sizable enemy forces. He is proud of his magical abilities that could target a few dozen people, contemplates the ambitious notion of developing his skills to the point of overpowering entire armies, an endeavor that seems almost miraculous. However, Atu reassures him, stating that the technology required for such advancements is not as challenging as it may seem, implying a relatively quick development process. In this revelation, Moulter gains insight into Takuto's understanding and recognition of magical potential. The system notification further solidifies their commitment, indicating the initiation of research on military magic. As they transition to planning military affairs, Takuto suggests the creation of a hero. Atu readily agrees, emphasizing the cost reduction and lower risk associated with this approach. The prospect of shaping a hero to stand at the forefront of their military endeavors adds a strategic layer to their evolving plans for the flourishing nation. When Jia asks what they mean by a hero, Atu explains that heroes are individuals chosen by the king who start off with great power. She describes them as essentially powerful beings with some quirks, who have the potential to become even stronger over time. Jia and Moulter express some confusion about this concept. Atu further explains that there are certain limitations when it comes to summoning heroes, which prevents them from summoning all of them, but they can at least summon one. Takuto chimes in, acknowledging the need for discretion in their current situation. He points out the downsides of having a large army, like high mana usage, the need for food supplies, upkeep costs, and the risk of drawing attention. Because of these factors, he decides to concentrate on creating just one hero for now. This decision aligns with their current strategy of staying under the radar and being efficient. Atu warns the group about the possible danger of bounty hunters who might view them as valuable targets to be sold into slavery. To protect against these risks and solve their current problems, she highlights the importance of having a hero. Curious about the true power of heroes, Molter respectfully inquires with Takuto. In response, Atu decides to illustrate rather than explain. As she walks a few steps, live tentacles suddenly emerge from her back, a shocking revelation for everyone. She unveils that she, too, is a hero, and what they just witnessed was only a fraction of her full power. The revelation leaves the elves in awe. The revelation of a single hero unit's capability to overpower an entire troop leaves Jia in shock. As he realizes the immense strength possessed by heroes like Atu and Takuto, she reassures them, stating that she can easily handle any adversaries that Takuto-sama might encounter, alleviating their concerns about military affairs. The cheerful moment is interrupted when Takuto reminds Atu to clean up the random trees she cut down to show her power, even though that's not what he intended to say. She's surprised but agrees to do it. Jia and Molter watch in amazement and offer to help as she starts cleaning up, looking a bit sad. With the hero unit's strength established, Takuto delegates the Dark Elves to move forward with the plans. A month later, proper houses have been erected, marking tangible progress in the development of their burgeoning nation. Both Takuto and Ita find immense satisfaction in witnessing the tangible progress of their efforts. Emiru, who is actively engaged in the work, expresses her happiness at being a part of this project. In response to Takuto's inquiry, she provides a detailed report on the progress of the construction project. She highlights that while the construction of homes is underway, the pace is not as rapid due to the primary focus on growing flesh trees. She showcases the progress of the trees, indicating the direction of their current efforts. On a positive note, the joint facility for both cultivation and food storage is advancing smoothly. The land cleared by lumberjacks is efficiently utilized for various purposes, including the collection hub, farms, and other facilities. Additionally, it is kept in reserve as a potential construction site for future facilities that may require a larger-scale terrain. She continues her report, sharing the discovery of a spring that can serve as a water source for the burgeoning settlement. She also expresses plans for a future boring well to enhance water supply. As she speaks animatedly, she points out a building under construction, intended for all bureaucratic proceedings. Despite Emiru's continuous flow of information, Takuto reflects on the current developments. He acknowledges that while they can construct more buildings in the future, the bare minimum currently being implemented is sufficient. Takuto is pleased that Emiru took care of things that he did not even instruct her to do. He is currently mapping out everything in his mind, concentrating on 3 key aspects for the prosperity of his country: internal development, planning research facility, and military planning. The progress in all these areas is going very smoothly, and, more importantly, the once grim Dark Elves are now actively collaborating with a vibrant zeal. This marks the initial success for Takuto. Emiru informs him that all the Dark Elves are putting in their utmost effort to repay his kindness to the best of their abilities. He expresses his satisfaction in having them as citizens, and Emiru, moved by the sentiment, becomes emotional. Atu mentions that she can empathize with her situation. Emiru, in turn, informs them that there is a shortage of manpower for daily necessities. Seeking guidance, she turns to Takuto for a solution. He reassures her, stating that he will personally manage the production of daily items, relieving them of any worries. He emphasizes the importance of not rushing the production process to maintain quality. Unbeknownst to them, the accelerated development is possible due to Takuto's emergency production methods and the tools he brought from the land of gods. Takuto suggests that, for the time being, they can all reside in the same house and there's no need for a separate palace. The idea of sharing a residence with the king shocks Molter and Emiru, as it feels unusual for them to live under the same roof as the monarch. He reassures them that it's acceptable, but Molter thinks that it's disrespectful to share living spaces with the king. On the other hand, Emiru points out that while building a royal palace might be expensive, it can generate extra resources and make the citizens happier, emphasizing the benefits of building palaces early on. Takuto expresses a desire for a floating castle, contemplating the possibility of creating one. Atu finds the idea romantic, envisioning the construction of the highest-level building from the most developed age. While the elder deems it absolutely impossible, Takuto remains confident, instilling a sense of hope. The stark difference in their perspectives surprises him. Emiru marvels at the gravity of power and wisdom possessed by the king. Atu advises Emiru to prioritize houses and food for the citizens before embarking on the ambitious project. Undeterred, Emiru and Molter stand united in front of Takuto, displaying their loyalty. It prompts cheers from everyone in acknowledgement of his leadership. Within the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, there exists a revered religious order known as the Holy Knight, proficient in both the pen and the sword. These formidable individuals are powerful fighters capable of working miracles, their prowess only falling short of that of a saint. Enjoying the favor and trust of the people, they are strategically stationed throughout the nation to address various state requirements. In response to a pressing matter, 2 holy knights, accompanied by a troop of mercenaries, are now en route to those lands, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. An expedition is sent out yesterday to probe the ominous threat hanging over the great cursed lands, prompted by a vision from the saint, Soalina. Lornius finds solace in continuous prayers to the holy god Arlos, seeking protection for the impending battle. As he fervently prays, someone inquires about the duration of his supplication. High-ranking Holy Knight Wordle, growing bored, expresses fatigue with what he perceives as nonsense from a holy saint. The constant disparity in ranks between Lornius, a low-ranking Holy Knight, and Wordle fuels an ongoing rift between them. Lornius informs Wordle that the dispatch of such a substantial number of troops indicates disturbances in the northern provinces. The limited availability of emergency troops necessitated his involvement. However, it wasn't just Lornius who were recruited. They were compelled to initiate recruitments and were unable to deploy forces from the national territory. Consequently, he had to manage with the resources available by hiring additional mercenary soldiers. Wordle initially taunts him, but surprisingly, he later acknowledges the significance of the 50 mercenaries. Lornius, however, holds a low opinion of Wordle, considering him vulgar and lacking in class. He deems him unworthy of being a holy knight. He points out that Saint Soalina's jurisdiction lies in the northern province, whereas the great cursed lands are situated in the southern part of the continent. This means that the responsibility of dispatching soldiers lies with the Southern Province Congress, yet the request for inspection came from the jurisdiction in the northern province. He notes that when it comes to the Dark Continent, it's always been preferable to be safe rather than sorry. He is well aware that the success of this reconnaissance mission could earn laurels for Wordle, but in the event of failure, all responsibility would fall squarely on his shoulders. This inevitability stems from his status as a low-ranking holy knight without the fallback of a distinguished lineage. However, he acknowledges the high chance of survival afforded by Wordle's presence as a high-ranking knight. As he contemplates the nature of the mission, he ponders if it could be the will of God. His thoughts are interrupted as he hears the leader of the mercenary troops, Bargot, discussing the disturbances in the northern provinces, reinforcing certainty that the road ahead will indeed be challenging. Despite bounties on the heads of dark elves, the soldiers are hesitant, prioritizing their own lives over potential rewards. One soldier vocalizes the perception that mercenaries are merely there to be ordered around. The conversation takes a turn as soldiers speculate about the presence of witches in the north, surprising Lornius and his comrades. Meanwhile, Atu experiences joy seeing the flesh tree being planted and growing rapidly. This marks a significant development, enabling a consistent food supply for all residents of the imperial capital of Manogra. Not only is food production flourishing, but the management of various facilities is also proceeding smoothly. These positive outcomes come just a few months after the last inspection. Atu eagerly anticipates the construction of the palace following the completion of houses. However, the Dark Elves express fear as the surrounding forest grows darker. She reassures them, explaining that it's an effect of Takuto's rule over the territory, transforming it into cursed soil. Becoming a citizen of Manogra connects individuals with the king's majesty. This influences not only the citizens but also the soil they live on. This magical soil has special properties. It increases the productivity of those aligned with evil, and at the same time weakens the defenses of neutral or good-aligned beings while they work. Imuru initially doesn't feel any positive influence from the cursed soil. Atu advises her to take a deep breath, prompting Imuru to close her eyes and inhale deeply. Finally, she experiences a refreshing sensation, a stark contrast to her previous feelings. Now, she feels at ease, as if she can consume flesh fruits without any issues. However, a new concern arises. The location appears highly conspicuous.
Here I